Welcome to Small Town Times. We're into 2024, and today we're going to be talking about North Bay issues for the year coming up, maybe a little bit of what was discussed last year. We have BayToday's Stu Campaigne, and we have former City Councillor Dave Mendicino. Welcome, guys. Stu, right off the bat, what do you think? What do you think is the top story coming into 2024?
Well, it's there are a few choices this year, although there's some pretty clear ones, I think. And of course, we did a podcast on Mr. Rhoda's kind of fall from grace as the Speaker of the House. I think that's to me that's kind of the newsmaker of the year. As far as a story, when I think someone asks me what the story of the year is, I always kind of think about something that's had legs. So it could have started in February, but we're still talking about it in December. And for me, that's the Chippewa renaming issue, although it seems to have now somewhat been resolved. I think it's still open for more interference, I guess I could say. We'll see where that goes. And then the other one, of course, is the ongoing community center saga to me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And Dave, the community center, what situation does council find themselves in now, and how do you think it might play out?
Well, I mean, but man, oh man, this thing has been 12 years in the making now, give or take. And, so we know last year council walked away from a $70 million contract to build the original design, which included a walking track and seating capacity of approximately, I'm going to say 1,100 between the two. They stepped back and saying 52 was the limit, and now, as we saw recently, 52 won't cut it. It's more like 62, and it looks like council has given staff the go ahead to proceed with that, but they don't have a final price. And it looks like they may proceed on that basis and starting a project with maybe not knowing the final price. And that's always a little nerve-wracking, if you will. But at the end of the day, it's just been way too long, and the user groups have waited way too long. Council seems to be committed to pulling the trigger on something this year, and that's something that I'm certainly in support of.
Well, it does look like they're heading towards building less for more. It's some respects.
That's the part. I mean, woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? I mean, they walked away from $70 million, and now with no walking track and the capacity, it'll be interesting to see what that final number ends up being. And at the end of the day, are they going to end up getting less for basically the same price? But only time will tell. I'm crossing my fingers. I fully support the project. It needs to go ahead. The community has been waiting for it for years, especially the user groups, and we need to upgrade our recreational facilities. And one way or another, they need to move ahead with that project.
Well, it is a stinking mess for sure, and I'm not really in agreement in going forward with something that doesn't represent a decent bang for your buck, right? So, and I agree with you, Stu. The Chippewa name change, it does have some life still left in it, as long as the last letter writer, Garth Goodhue, who is a former principal of Chippewa, saying that basically he doesn't trust the paid people to make the decision. He wants to make sure the trustees have their final say on it because they have a closer feeling for what the community believes, which is to keep the name, right?
Yeah, well, and let's not forget the trustees are paid too. But
well, they're elected though.
Yes, they are. Yeah. I understand what you say. We hear the same complaint about City Hall about how the staff is wagging the tail and the council is merely just rubber stamping everything.
Do you believe that? By the way?
I think it's. I don't think it's as blatant as people, especially the big critics, make it out to be. But I do think I could see scenarios where councillors would feel obliged to follow along. I'm not saying that they're bad ideas or anything, but I do think there's definitely a part of City Hall that is really ultimately running things. I do believe that.
Yeah, I could see that, specifically some councillors definitely embrace and lean on staff recommendations because they are the experts. They do some, consulting to find out, they do the homework and they're just relaying what they know, the best what they think. I think sometimes the equation there about what a council has to make sure that they're keeping a good pulse on what the community wants and what the community feels like. Your experience with a council, Dave, and staff, I know you were always in there trying to get staff input, and you're a pretty close relationship with them, and without sounding like you're too much of a believer in whatever the staff say, what was your experience?
Well, at the end of the day, the rubber hits the road with council, and council has one employee that they are in control of, and that's the CEO. They direct the CEO based on what they want, and as far as staff go, they are the experts. As a councillor, you need to make an informed decision on anything that you vote on. We hire staff, we pay them good money to be the professionals to give us their opinion, their feedback. Certainly, as a councillor, you need to lean on them to a certain degree to get the information so that you can make a decision. But at the end of the day, I mean, I get the for me, I would get the information and make my decision based on the information I got from staff, talking to some other councillors, and maybe doing some external work on my own. But again, if you're not happy with the way council with the way senior staff are conducting themselves or giving the information, then find someone else. But we pay them good money, taxpayer money. You should utilize them. Don't always rely on them 100% because you want to, that's why I always, for myself, I always want to try to do an external kind of review for do my own research as well. That way you're covering the bases. Staff are giving you the information. You're getting the information maybe from outside as well. For me, that always allowed me to make an informed decision. Not always agreeing with staff. You need to challenge them. Perhaps when I was sitting there, the public didn't necessarily see that. Myself personally, I chose to do that challenging behind the scenes because for me, it was always better that way.
Interesting. We're going to come back to that. But riffing off of what you talked about with Anthony Rota being Newsmaker of the Year for all the wrong reasons, I think with potential of a federal election a year earlier than expected, there may be more news coming out of the Liberal camp because to find out who's going to be running for the Liberals. Any idea? Yeah.
Well, we talked about this a few months ago, and I'm no further ahead with candidates. I've heard the same names we've talked about, and I'm kind of wondering if it matters at this point, to be honest. But I think if Mr. Rota said he's not going to run, and to take him at his word, I think it's no matter what he does, whether he tells people a week before the election or a year ahead, it's going to leave a huge hole for the Liberal Party here in this riding. You don't replace someone with his pedigree easily. So I think you have to look at the Conservatives obviously as kind of moving towards probably a favorite in our riding.
Who's going to run for the Conservatives?
Well, we know Cassidy Villeneuve is running. Which she had a little kind of an announcement, before the holidays, and that's all I've heard. For sure. There's lots of names, and again, that we can rehash all that if you like, but yeah. I mean, we said that we think maybe Al McDonald runs for Well, one or the other, probably the Conservatives.
Flip a coin.
Yeah. And, I think there's some other interesting names. Dave probably has a lot more insight into this than I do. But
I mean, from a Liberal standpoint, I think, let's face it, what we see right now is the Trudeau government is running on fumes. Their best before date, it seems to have expired. The Liberals might have trouble finding a really good candidate to run. If Anthony was running under these circumstances, Anthony Rota is beloved here in Nipissing. I think he would still have a shot of winning his seat, notwithstanding that the Liberals, in all likelihood, will not be the government in power. From a Conservative standpoint, I mean, we've seen one individual step forward. Not really hearing any other names,
Jay Aspin just got the Order of Ontario or something like that, right?
Yeah, he did. I don't see him, stepping up, but who knows? I mean, I shouldn't be even saying that because I'm not that close to the situation, but we'll see. It'll be an interesting election here locally, though.
Well, we had Peter Churchill ran for that particular office once as well. You never rule him out. You never know.
Is there any other high-profile political person, Conservative in North Bay, that's not doing any politics right now?
Well, the guy that I don't know who you getting at.
Well, the former mayor.
Oh, you mean moving from provincial to federal?
The former mayor, no.
Al McDonald.
Al McDonald.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Vic there. I was like,
Yes.
holy jeez.
And I'm not saying that because I know anything other than to me, if I'm the Conservatives looking for candidates, obviously he would be someone that they would be talking to. I would think see if there's any interest there.
I thought he had a falling out with a lot of the Conservatives in town, but that's just rumors, right? Just rumors, right? I think he should run for the Liberals. That would be very funny, interesting. Anyways, let's move on to what will be definitely a story: Trout Lake development. Now, I know you have some strong feelings about it, but Stu, what are you hearing about the rules that they're thinking about putting into place and the timeline for that?
Well, for me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I'm reading the same reports everyone else is reading. I don't have a lot of inside information to it. In fact, I didn't actually cover it for BayToday. David Briggs covered it because he gets the East Ferris angle as well. But, I have a kind of a high level. I get the sense that, obviously there's a big, first of all, I want to say that the reports, the studies were, there's some questions about them. I think that's fair to say on no matter where you stand on it. I think not to say that they're faulty or anything, but I think if of course you can take any reporter study and a piece of paper and bend it to your own, to your own purposes. There's a healthy faction of people who are against any development on Trout Lake. That's been made obvious. And I don't think it's a valid stance. Although the funny part I hear about that kind of behind the scenes is it's always people that they say it's always people that live on the lake already that don't want more people to live on the lake. So
I got my shoreline.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that's completely accurate, but I think there is a part of that might be true. It's a tough one. Like, you got to look down the line 50, 100 years. This is our source of drinking water in North Bay. How is this proposal going to affect it? And that's the simple way of putting it is, but who knows? I mean, you can get all the studies you want. You could probably order 5 studies tomorrow that'll tell you the opposite of what we've been told already.
I'm sure that we could do a series, and I'd like to organize one where we look at the very different aspects with various experts. But Dave, you live on the lake. You're pro-development, and tell me why you think it's a good idea to develop around Trout Lake.
Well, I mean, if you're sitting there as a city councillor, and let's make no question, I think Stu would agree with this. The councillors are going to be really pressured not to do anything by the say the Trout Lake Conservation Association or whatever. But it'll be important for every one of those members to really stay at a high level when they're looking at this. It's the quality the quality of Trout Lake. That's our drinking water. That is first and foremost. That's the number one priority. But the other priority is you still have to grow your city. You still have to increase your tax base, and the development on Trout Lake, if it's controlled, if it using today's technologies, I think you can do it. I think you need to look at it. I mean, in terms of again, if you're trying to grow your tax base, grow your business, there's a lot of demand for lakefront living, and why wouldn't there be? So council's really going to have to take hopefully a balanced look at it, and try not to be swayed by the individuals that are saying. I had one individual, and this is a number of years ago, 15 years ago, saying we don't want any development on Trout Lake. In fact, when a property becomes available on Trout Lake, sometimes the city should look at purchasing it and just not tearing down the house. That's not realistic. I think controlled development is certainly attainable. The rules and regs that are in place are 30, 35 now years old at least. Technology has increased tremendously. But it's also important to note that right now there's a 300-meter barrier on Trout Lake. So you cannot develop within 300 meters of the lake. And that's not necessarily just lots on the lake. It means any lot, 900 meters, like for on Anita Avenue, for instance. There's a potential lot development on the other side of the street, not on the lake side. But up until now, they could not develop those lots because they're within 900 meters, 300 meters of the lake, basically 900 feet. So when you hear about lot development, it's not just on the lake, it's any lot within 300 meters of Trout Lake.
Two things.
And its tributaries. I think it's important to add that too, right, Dave? Like also the creeks that run off the lake, up the hill.
Yes.
So all of those, not just Trout Lake.
Absolutely.
I think it's important.
So I mean, when people
tributaries running into the lake.
when people hear 100 lots on Trout Lake, oh my God, we can't. But again, you got to keep in mind that it's not just lots on Trout Lake. I think I read it on one of your articles, Stu, where Councillor Gardner was saying it's not just 100 lots, but there's also 200 vacant lots within that 300-meter barrier, if you will, that would also could be triggered. There's also 186 seasonal dwellings on Trout Lake, which might end up seeing some development. So, to me, it's something that I would support. I think we need to see some development on Trout Lake. You haven't seen any for 30, 40 years, but to just sit there and say no way, we're not going to do it without looking at the technology that's involved, without looking at all the advances that have been made to septic systems and that, I think from a council perspective, that would be a mistake.
Now, you mentioned 30, 40 years, but I know that North Shore development was less than 20 years ago, and some of the rules were changed because of that, pushing into the OMB and allowing development with higher technology septic systems. They have that data. One of the things I've always wondered about when we're talking about the drinking water, like Delaney Bay is where the pipe has the intake, right? It's at a deep point. It's spring fed at that end as well as tributaries. But the water flows east, out, down through the Narrows, right? At what point does the development not affect where the drinking water is actually taken? Like, is there a halfway point on Trout Lake where it doesn't flow this way, so it doesn't really matter?
I'm not a water expert, so I won't pretend to know, but I
It's always
understand
been
what
a
you're
question
saying.
I had,
Yeah, like it's like, again, high level. This is really about future of our drinking water, and basically making money. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making money. Dave's points are very well taken. I think what needs to be done, though, it has to be cleared up to a point where people just aren't concerned. People who have concerns get a chance to answer those, ask those questions. They've had some consultations. It's a tough one. This is one of those ones, and to bring it all the way back to our city hall discussions, these are the types of issues that when people ran for council and promised a bunch of stuff and had all these aspirations about making all these changes, this is the kind of stuff they should have been practicing. Because it's a very nuanced situation. There's lots of sides to it. And it is really, to me, as a citizen and a journalist, it's one of those ones where there's no real right answer, but there's not a wrong answer either. So you got to find that middle ground. And and it's not just the new councillors. Someone like Chris Main probably has an advantage because he's been dealing with this for, decades. He's been part of the Conservation Authority for a long time over the years. So yeah, he has a little more, but like any of them, nobody's trained to deal with this stuff. It's all it all has to be about your personal morals and viewpoints, but you have to incorporate that with what you're hearing from the constituency, which I think is what has been missing a lot in this early part of this council. Is a lot of, again, promises were made to represent the people, and I feel like some of the people don't feel like that's actually happening. So that's kind of my water spin off into other things.
I was actually surprised that it wasn't an issue during the last election. I mean, this is city just didn't wake up one morning and say, well, this is what we're going to do. This has been a 2-year process to get to this point. And I just read the other week where East Ferris now is, well, let's do our own study. Well, it's not cheap to do it. Number one, I think they settled on bringing in the consultants that did the current study, and obviously their council needs to be informed and educated as well. But they're looking at it as well in East Ferris and saying, what are we going to do? Well, it's Stu mentioned it. It's got to be balanced. It's got to be in between. But again, as a councillor, I just hope they stay high level and listen to everybody, pros and cons to both, and you're going to hear that. And hopefully they can make an informed decision that we're going to move ahead, but we're going to do it in a balanced way. If you look at the new lot development creation, 100 lots, and I think maybe 30 or so are on the East Ferris side, and the rest are on the North Bay side, give or take, plus the 200 lots, vacant lots that currently exist that could be triggered in if you take away that 300-meter barrier. There's a lot of potential there. And as long as it's in a controlled fashion, and you keep in mind the quality, that the drinking water is a priority, as it should be. I think they can see their way to move ahead with something.
Well, speaking of promises and timeframes, the review of city efficiencies review, where's that sit, Stu?
Well, to be honest, I haven't heard a lot about it, and I think there's for good reason. And Dave and I, as we were talking before the show, Dave says, they're not going to have it done before the budget, which was kind of the whole point. Not to steal your point, Dave, but you're right. I mean, I had this inkling that it's maybe to back up a bit. So when the new council took over, there was a lot of energy, right? There was a lot of, we're going to get things done and we're going to do this. And, people buy into that stuff. And I think they all have good intentions and all that. But when you start adding things like this review and, just like the community center, things just aren't happening in the timeframes that are given anymore. Like when I see something like, oh, we're going to have this done by August, I think, okay, well, I'll see it in January. And I'm generally right. And there's no specific example. That's just kind of the way things run. It's such a bureaucracy going on where, this person has to look at it. Now the next person has to give their okay. And we have to get the stakeholders to talk about it. And that's the process. But like this review, I had my doubts, and I guess hindsight is 2020 obviously, but I had my doubts that it would get done in time to mean anything early on in this term, anyways. And Dave can probably fill you in a little more on that about what he's heard about the process. Maybe I've covered it all. I don't know.
Well, I mean, let's back up. They're into their second. Each council has 4 budgets. They're into their second budget. If you recall, we did a podcast right around the time of the first budget, where they used about 800,000 in reserves for the water and sewer, and about $1 million in reserves in their general operating. They put a hiring freeze on. All with the premise that we're going to wait for the operational review, and with the thinking we'll find some efficiencies and go from there. So now they're going to do their second budget without this operational review. And as Stu just mentioned, if the operational review, we see it in the spring or summer, now you're into the third budget year, and not to say they're not going to find efficiencies, different ways of doing things. And the fact that there's a hiring freeze on will help with the offset the reserves that they used last year. They might not have to dip into reserves so much this year. But, again, they still have to, there's still a 1.8, an $800,000 hole in the water and sewer, and $1 million or so in the operating. But it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of this operational review, and how creative or how deep they want to go with changes. There's all kinds of things you could do if council really had the.
Got any examples? All kinds of things.
Well, you can. If you're looking at your whole operation, and there's a lot of big talk about over a year ago, as Stu alluded to, of we're going to make changes, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Well, how serious are you? I mean, are you willing to look at the library? And to me, the library that I used to go to as a kid, in this day and age, with everything's at your fingertips these days. Do you need that kind of? And I'm not sitting here saying yes or no, but are these the kinds of things they're going to look at? Do you look at? This would be very radical, but do you look at North Bay Hydro and put it on the market and net yourself maybe your $100 million? Imagine that. Again, not saying good or bad. I would never take a position on it unless I did my full review and did my homework and knew all the information. But how far out are they going to want to go? And I heard a lot of them making a lot of promises at the last election. And the flip side of an operational review is it may identify areas where you need more. Mm-hmm. And then what? Do you do it?
So we got slash, burn, and sell from Mendo for possible ideas for city council budget. Stu, you got any ideas? I'm having a little fun here, because again, if
are they going to be looking at it? Do they look at the departments? Can you privatize the IT department? And you can hire companies to run your IT. There's, 15, 16 employees there. And, do you look at privatizing it? It's going to be interesting to see how far they're willing to go based on the recommendations that are going to be brought forward.
Just because you mentioned the library, I'm going to stand up for a bit. If it was reviewed, I would point to the reality is that there's a lot of groups that use it. When I'm looking around for events for the Echo Essentials newsletter, more and more often I see things that are being held and done at the library. And I've been there probably more than you have recently. And it seems to be well used. Mm-hmm. Well used, even with the technology, because they have technology there for the people that want to use it, mm-hmm. right? Stu, what do you think would be something that council should review as a service?
Well, first off, let me say these reviews, and I'm not speaking from experience here in North Bay, but I do a lot of reading in different municipalities, and I find these reviews, it's not, like there's the approach that Dave has, shit, can we cut this? Can we cut? And that's kind of what it's about. But I also find a lot of times what comes out of these is not what can we cut? It's how do we make this better? So we're going to spend money to get the efficiency. It's not free.
Yeah.
We're not just giving someone a haircut. So those are the kind of things I just kind of, when they talked about doing this review, I thought, you know what? I bet you a bunch of these things are coming back. IT over there is, and this is no slight to the people that work there. It's a mess. Like, we're behind the times. The reason we need all the people working there is just to keep up with all the nonsense. I mean, if I was going to do efficiencies, I would do, like Dave suggested, farm it out. But you could also, another option is to just make it run properly, and make it be efficient, which is, I know, a buzzword, but that's the kind of thing I'd be looking for with a review. There's a bunch of capital projects on the books that I think staff is reluctant to take off the books. These things maybe need to be done soon or soonish. So that's another way. You just take, like, these just like, I remember I did a story about this. They're going to 4-lane McEwen Avenue, right down at the end by one kid's place. It seems to me like a really great initiative. You 4-lane now. The whole thing's 4-laned. You get a bike multi-use path off to the side. People can cross safely at different places. All makes a lot of sense to me as a motorist in North Bay, someone with children. But there's just like a whole bunch of people. So what a waste of money this is. But it's because they don't use it as much as other people. That's the kind of thing that I find we get bogged down in a lot with municipal affairs is sometimes the really loud minority gets their way. And maybe that's part of the process too. But I'd like to see a lot more of this is for everybody. The community center is another good example. there have been points during this where I've said they just can't do it for this price, but I'm not saying we don't need it. And I guess need is a funny word there, but there's got to be a way to find a good price and get people most of what they want for now. And I think that's what politics is. You're not always going to please everybody, but some things, it just make sense and you just do them. And I'm not saying, open up the pocketbook and spend whatever. That's absolutely not the way. And I don't think, despite comments and messages on boards, I don't think any city councillor or city staff member goes, well, I'm really going to show these people I'm going to spend 3 times as much on this as what it needs to be. I don't believe that at all. And I don't think any common thinking person thinks that. But it's all a balance. So we keep saying this, right? Balance. It's a balance. It's a balance. It's figuring out a way to do things in a fiscally responsible way to serve as many people as you can, because you're not going to please everybody, and doing it in a period of time that makes sense. To me, that's what the job is.
I mean, it's not like operational reviews have never been done. I mean, in my experience, there was a long period there where if people were retiring, they took a good hard look at that position to see if they needed it or they could do it better. If they can find efficiencies within this review, and maybe those efficiencies, as Stu alluded to, means doing it differently. That's where everyone's going to have to keep an open mind. And if you can do it differently and still deliver the service, then have at it. But, you start messing around with city services in terms of maybe not providing them or not providing as much, you're going to fill the council chamber. That's been my experience. I mean, I heard that I don't know how many times. Yeah, taxes are too high. Well, would you like to cut this? No. This, no. What about cutting this? No, we can't cut that. So, it's just going to be an interesting process. And then I wonder, once it's there, you start implementing it, and pretty soon you're going to be into the third budget season. and have at it from there, I guess.
All right. Well, a lot of good little chat there, different issues. I'm going to wrap it up to keep it somewhat digestible here. But one last thing. Anybody hear anything about Cassellholme? It's the big bugaboo a year ago, but and I'm seeing that they've made quite a bit of progress on the one wing, the first one, the first phase, I guess. Any have you heard anything? It used to be an important issue for you, Dave.
Well, it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that last 4 year, the last council term. A lot of tears at the way it was handled by Cassellholme. Number
we
one,
got the Cassellholme factor as well.
Yeah, you have the Cassellholme. I mean, number one, that last council made the Cassellholme development. That was the number one project. We need it, but I'm still nervous to this day because I guess kind of similar to the community recreation center now. There is no set budget. I know they say 121 million, but I think you're dreaming in Technicolor if you think it's going to come in at that. It's just a matter of how much how far north it's going to go. The Castle Arms issue to me is it was a travesty what they did last term in terms of take those assets, those buildings, those rental buildings out of the control of the municipalities. I know, and Councillor Lowry mentions that the municipalities never really had it. They didn't own the assets, and he's technically correct, but the municipalities had control over those assets because of the way the board was structured. That's no more, and that's gone kind of quiet, but I hear it's being dealt with, but we'll see.
Stu?
Not a lot to add to that. I mean, I hear the mayor is, he's on the board, so he's looking into it. That's kind of the last thing that was told to me. Intrepid reporter Joanne Brousseau seems to have a bee in her bonnet about it. So, I mean, I think there's a difference between going to meetings and finding the parts that matter. Castle Arms there's something hinky there. There's no doubt. There always was. I could never get to the bottom of it. I looked into it. I talked to different people about it. It's a hard thing to explain to people, right? Like for what I do for a living, it's hard to take an issue like that that's really, honestly, quite boring, but important. And those are always the hardest ones. We did stuff on it, but we haven't followed it through. I admit that, and I'm kind of waiting to see the next shoe to drop, kind of thing. But as long as Joanne's at those meetings, I've got the inside scoop. So I think we'll be fine. And I just think it's like Dave's covered it. Like he's explained it very well. There's a little bit of nuance to it. I know there was a lot of it was just personal politics. I think that people didn't get along. And so used, their positions at Cassellholme or Castle Arms to manifest that. And I don't think anyone will deny that. Think about all the different councillors, and I believe you were one of them, that cycled through that board as we tried to get at least some people on there who could get along and try to get things done. And to your credit, I think you were one of them. So, it's important, but it's not to the point there where I can write a new article on it every week because nothing seems to be happening, at least not in public. And to go to those meetings, I wish I could go to all the meetings. I really do. I wish I could cover the Conservation Authority. I wish I could cover the library. I wish I could. We do cover police board, but I only have so many hours in a day. Like, I've got other things to do. I cover what I can, and I had to drop the Cassellholme meetings for a while because it just didn't fit in my schedule anymore. It really is the difference for me between working like a 10-hour day and a 16-hour day. Yeah. So
I think we should put David Briggs on it because it does impact the other municipalities where his coverage is. If anything, maybe there's another media outlet out there that wants to dive into it. it's open fair game for anybody who wants to cut their teeth in some real journalism.
Sorry.
Got some indigestion there?
Yeah, I've noticed that the media landscape has expanded in North Bay, or so I've heard, but
I haven't heard an official announcement. I'm not even sure who's involved with that.
I have not seen
Report
the thing.
North Bay. But we'll hear it when it's announced. But all jokes aside, guys, thanks for coming in. We covered some ground here, a little bit about the 2023 stories that have overlapped and will grow into bigger stories for 2024. It's going to be an interesting year as always. So thanks, Dave. Thanks, Stu.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
And we'll do it again.